This podcast may contain explicit language. I'm gonna have to science the shit out of this. The Martian is next. Welcome to the Greatest Movie of All Time podcast, the show that uses a unique grading style to redefine what the greatest movies are. I'm Tom Duncan.
And I'm Dana Duncan.
Tonight, for our 281st episode, we discuss The Martian from 2015, celebrating its 10th anniversary. Directed by Ridley Scott, written by Drew Goddard. Cinematography by Darius Wolski. Music by Harry Gregson Williams. Starring Matt Damon as Dr. Mark Watney. Jessica Chastain as Commander Melissa Lewis, Chiwetel Ejiofor as Vincent Kapoor, Kristen Wiig as Annie Montrose, Jeff Daniels as Theodore Teddy Sanders, Michael Pena as Major Rick Martinez, Sean Bean as Mitch Henderson, Kate Mara as Beth Johansson, Sebastian Stan as Dr. Chris Beck, Axel Henny as Dr. Alex Vogel, Mackenzie Davis as Mindy Park, Benedict Wong as Bruce, I'm going to say Wynn. I'm not really sure how to pronounce NG, but okay. Donald Glover as Rich Purnell, Chen Shu as Zhu Tao, Eddie Ko as Guo Ming, and Nick Mohammed as Tim Grimes. Background for the movie: The Martian was released on October 2nd, 2015 in the United States. It grossed $228.4 million in the United States and Canada, and $402.2 million in other countries, for a worldwide total of $630.6 million, against a budget of $108 million, to finish number 10 at the worldwide box office for 2015, but it was the highest-grossing non-IP film for that year. Everything else was either sequel, or even if it wasn't a sequel, it was like the first in a franchise type of thing. The Martian was a critical success and was named by the National Board of Review and by the American Film Institute that year as one of the top 10 films of 2015. The Martian also received 7 Oscar nominations for Best Picture, Actor for Matt Damon, Adapted Screenplay for Goddard, Production Design, Sound Editing, Sound Mixing, when they were still distinct categories, and Visual Effects. In 2025, it was one of the films voted for the Reader's Choice edition of the New York Times list of the best 100 movies of the 21st century, finishing at number 174. The Martian currently holds a 91% among critics on Rotten Tomatoes, an 80 score on Metacritic, and a 3.8 out of 5 on Letterboxd. Of course, we can't do this by ourselves, so we bring in our returning celebrity guest, our colleague from Duncan Disability Law, making his now 3rd appearance on the show to date. Please welcome back Braden Ganter.
Thanks for having me, guys. It's nice to be back. It's been a little while, I know that for sure, but I'm glad to be doing this movie today. As Tom knows, I'm a big fan, but I hope not to mess up the rankings too much.
I think it'll be fine. If anything, knowing my father in science fiction and such, he'll probably drag down whatever fanboying you're going to do with this movie and keep an even keel. The two of you will balance each other out, and I'll play the middle. Sound good?
That works.
All right. So you have been gone since, I think, season 3, when you were on our Godfather Part 2 episode. How have you been since then?
I would say there's not too many life updates to cover. I've been about the same. Still keeping busy, still living in the same place was living last time. You know, same old thing.
You don't have any books to plug or new podcasts that you're a part of or any other media conglomerate things that you'd like to promote?
No, I don't have a Twitch stream that I'm trying to get people to follow or watch or whatever.
Shoot. I was definitely hoping for your OnlyFans.
I will recommend, since we're talking about space exploration today and stuff, Neil deGrasse Tyson does a good podcast on physics and stuff. So look that up if you're interested in a plug for a new podcast.
All right. We will have to check that out. But we get into The Martian. Now, I'm very familiar that this is Dad's first time with the movie.
Yes.
I know that shortly after about 2015, so probably about the next year, you started trying to keep up with me on watching all of the Best Picture nominees. I don't think there are more than a handful of years you've actually accomplished that, because there are certain years, like you didn't watch Avatar 2, and I know that you didn't watch Roma and some other things, but this is one of those that kind of like...
watch Roma.
I don't believe you did. You certainly
Okay.
didn't watch it with me.
No, I didn't.
Okay. But I know that you haven't quite gotten every single one in until we started really doing the show over the last few years. So this is one that had escaped you. I know it is somewhat of a crowd pleaser and a generally popular favorite, probably more among the audience than it is necessarily the industry. I guess the reason I say that is I've heard a lot of people anecdotally through the last 10 years that have brought this movie up out of the blue and said this was like a favorite of theirs, Braden being one of them, who I'm like, really? That movie? Okay, cool. But first impressions for you.
Well, I thought it was a good film.
Okay.
In fact, I think it's one of Ridley Scott's better films.
I mean, I know that we didn't put him in our pantheon of directors, so I'm loath to say that he has like he's got a lot of movies, but he's only got a very select few that are like all-time classics or even very good.
Yeah. He's got a lot of shit.
Yeah.
And so, but this was a pretty good movie, solid. I like Matt Damon. I of course like Jeff Daniels, because pretty much anything Jeff Daniels is in, I like. I think there was a lot of strong performances. The script was good. I was really pleasantly surprised by, even though it's supposed to be at the time 20 years into the future, they didn't overdo it. Like everybody is wearing like this astro suit on Earth to promote the future of space. You know, it was very traditional. It looked like it would be readily in line with where progress was going and such. And it seemed like a plausible story and plausible situation. I mean, I'm not a scientist, but I took geology and such in college and such. So I know a little bit about what was going on and what some of the discussions were. So I could follow along with it. So I thought it was a decent story. I thought it was well done. I thought it stayed true to science, and I enjoyed it. Is it going to be in my favorites of all time? No, but it was fine.
Well, I'm glad that you at least enjoyed it. I thought it was a generally favorable movie, and I know that you don't get on well with sci-fi and particularly fantasy. So this one being more hard science fiction may have appealed a little bit more to you. If I were creating Ridley Scott's Mount Rushmore, so you can only have 4 choices, it's definitely Alien, it's definitely Blade Runner, and because Gladiator won Best Picture, that's got to be the 3rd. This is in the running for the 4th, probably with Black Hawk Down. Personally, I would put this in over Black Hawk Down, but I can at least entertain an argument where you might say the other gets in over this. But if you're asking me what is his best late stage movie, it's overwhelmingly this, because I think this is the only movie in the last 15 years of his that's anything more than just kind of like I'm trying to think of the right word for it, sarcastic watch, like House of Gucci is.
Yes, every once in a while, when I was a kid, my dad would make dinner if my mom was not going to be home on time. So he tended to do what he called refrigerator soup. He would just take whatever he could find for leftovers and dump it in a bowl or in a pot of water and cook it.
Oof.
Yeah, it wasn't great. Sometimes it was. So, but that's kind of what I find most of Ridley Scott's films to be lately.
Okay. Well, yeah. I can't necessarily argue with that. But we are here to celebrate this film. So, Braden, you already disclosed that this is one of your favorites. What is your relationship with the film?
I don't know if I've ever, maybe then more than just once, streamed this on purpose to sit down and watch it. This is one that I've seen snippets of and parts of multiple times because it's just sort of on TV.
Mm.
I know we're getting farther and farther away from flipping through the TV guide, but The Martian shows up often and is one I'll select when it does show up.
It's a remote dropper.
And then that's the thing. I do select it and then sort of, well, I know what I'm doing for the next couple of hours.
Okay. I mean, there are a lot of those types of films for people, and I think it could be a very rewatchable film. I can't say that I have seen this on a lot on cable, although it would be a fairly easy cable movie to watch. It's got individualized chapters. You can pick up at different spots in the movie without really losing a whole lot. And it's about the right length that with commercials, you can put it at about 3 hours and it fills a really nice block.
Yeah, I agree. Again, it's just a good one to select. It's a good one you can pick up on halfway through the film. If you're familiar with the plot, it's still entertaining to watch, but you don't need to, refresh your memory and rack your brain as to what's going on up to this point in the movie.
I will say that my relationship with this is I watched it in the theater. I knew it was going to be up for Oscars at the time that it came out. Matt Damon might be my favorite actor. I mean, I genuinely like pretty much almost anything Matt Damon is in. That being said, I haven't seen The Great Wall, but he's got a gravitas to me. I mean, I've appreciated pretty much anything going back to young Matt Damon when you've got The Rainmaker and Mr. Ripley and Rounders, and then you get into the Bourne films where he's a little bit more action heavy, but then you offset that with his Ocean's appearances. So he's got a very long career to me that I just enjoy the total oeuvre for him. There's that word again, Dad.
Yeah.
Are you okay? Do you need a second?
Yeah. No, I'm
Did
I'm
I touch
fine.
your oeuvre?
Yeah, it's fine. Go ahead. I don't care.
Okay. All right. Regardless, I haven't seen it again since theaters, but this isn't one, like, I remembered really liking it at the time that I saw it, but it's not something I've really revisited. And like I said, I haven't really seen it all that much on cable, although to be fair, in the 10 years since that has happened, I don't watch a whole lot on cable at this point. And basically everything has been turned over to streaming services. So the ability to just find something randomly on and just put it on is less and less. So while there is an entire era of movies where you could do that with, Shawshank being probably near the top of those, A Few Good Men, and if you add something like this in, I just haven't been exposed to that nearly as much. That being said, I was excited to revisit this and have a nice excuse to revisit it because I remembered liking it at the time. So, Dad, you have a quick plot summary ready for us?
I do. The Martian is a science fiction drama about astronaut Mark Watney, Matt Damon, who is stranded on Mars after his crew believes he has died in a storm. Alone on the hostile planet, he must use his skills as a botanist and engineer to grow food, create water, and survive until rescue is possible. Back on Earth, NASA and its crew race against time to bring him home. The film showcases human resilience, ingenuity, and the power of teamwork in the face of seemingly insurmountable odds.
Thank you, Dad. So, what is this movie about?
Survival.
Okay, take the low-hanging fruit first. Yeah, sure. I mean, that's the quite obvious choice.
Well, it's appreciating your life enough that you're willing to do something almost impossible in order to sustain it.
Yeah, I think that's one thing that the movie doesn't really explore early on. He just kind of determines that he's going to survive on Mars and this is not going to be the end of him. But there's really not that internal discussion. Not that I think you probably could have that internal discussion where he's really considering, boy, do I really want to go through what it's going to take to survive on this planet and make sure I don't die? But that's got to be a part of that calculation for anybody who's stranded anywhere, let alone on a planet millions of miles from Earth.
Yeah, and when the Hab, his station blows up on Mars, he sort of just, screams and yells, and that's it for the scene. But you could have really seen just a little bit more of him thinking about giving up, wanting to give up. But no, you're right. There's really not much of that in this film.
And instead of maybe the word survival, I'm going to use the phrase perseverance, because I think the ending of the film is actually very telling. I'm not usually a big fan when the base portion of the movie is really over, that we need to see how these characters ended up. In a TV show, that's great because you kind of want to see what the end for each of these characters that you've spent so much time investing in is. But in a movie, it's usually not something I really feel is necessary. In this particular case, watching him teach these young kids and then his speech at the end of the film, you solve one problem and then you solve the next problem and you solve the next problem. And eventually you solve enough problems, you get to go home. To me, that's the message of the film is that you break down any problem and it's like eating an elephant. You do it one bite at a time.
And a lot of trips to the bathroom.
You've touched on one thing that I was going to mention that this movie is about, and this movie is about being good at science, knowing a lot about science, being intelligent, and using that to your advantage. I think we'll get into that a little bit more later when we get into some of the category scores, but I do think that's all part of the theme here.
It's a good thing you didn't have any Tylenol in the station.
Wow, that's not going to age poorly. That's so topical right now.
Yeah, okay.
Dad. Anyway, so we kind of brought it up already, but is this Ridley Scott's best film since Gladiator? I say yes.
Easily.
I would also say pretty easily yes. You said Black Hawk Down is after Gladiator?
I think it's the following year.
Okay. So. Yeah, I know a guy that's his favorite movie is Black Hawk Down, and of course, so everyone's got their own preference and own favorite movie. But for me, no, this is the best one since Gladiator.
Like, I don't think people are going to put The Martian ahead of the other three films that I mentioned from Ridley Scott. They're not going to put it above Gladiator because there's just this contingent, and we covered Gladiator earlier this year, so you can go back and listen to that episode. But there's a contingent that's just like really in love with that movie and the performance by Russell Crowe and everything about kind of the ambiance, even though it's an imperfect film. And then Alien, you could say, is one of the most important sci-fi movies ever made. I think there's at least a decent argument. And Blade Runner also has kind of this contingent of fans that, I don't know, would probably place it very highly. I know it's critically well reviewed. The Martian to me is not any one of those three films, but if you fit it in amongst all the other Ridley Scott fare, we can talk about The Last Duel. We can talk about The House of Gucci, I guess. We can talk about Napoleon. There's just a lot of those that I don't care for and really have no interest in revisiting. This is not one of those films.
Something about Ridley Scott, he'll have the ability on a particular film to connect with a whole group of people. And so you'll have this whole group of people who will find one of his films their favorite. And I've never seen that power in a particular filmmaker. It's like they're pods.
I think he's really good at two things, particularly in his direction. One is the science fiction aspect. I mean, he's done a lot of different sci-fi films that are good. Obviously, Alien. He's done Prometheus, I think. He came back to do that for the Alien franchise, which I think, for the most part, people liked, if I remember right. I've never seen it, so I don't know. Blade Runner's in that category, this film. And then he does battle sequences and, like, sword fights really well. Hence Gladiator.
Mm-hmm. That was the best part of Napoleon.
Yeah, I would agree. That was, frankly, to me, the only part of it that worked, because anything that was like the interpersonal relationship or the character development seemed to fall flat as far as I was concerned. So he does those things really well. But if his movies are going to be successful, and I think he's very much carried by a what I would say is an all-star cast. I forgot how many big names or recognizable names are in this, to the point where I got like 15 down the cast list, and you get Nick Muhammad, who everybody knows now as Nate from Ted Lasso. That's the level of depth in this movie.
Yeah. I know. I didn't realize that all these people were in it until I started watching it, and I'm going, oh yeah, all right.
Yeah. So, and I think some of them had name recognition at this point. Like Jessica Chastain and Kate Mara had obviously done things, but Sebastian Stan was really known for being the Winter Soldier, and that was it. He hadn't really made a true transition to something bigger. Michael Pena had been in stuff, but Michael Pena is not a household name. He's a name that cinephiles know because he's been in random things forever. So it's a very good cast to very great cast that I think brings up the rest of the material. Because if you don't have really charismatic people like Matt Damon, well, we'll get to him in a bit. But Jessica Chastain doesn't have a huge part in this movie, but she's really necessary to carrying parts of this movie. Mm-hmm. Jeff Daniels, the same thing. You need charismatic people to make this material work.
Well, then some almost seem unnecessary or over the top, like having Donald Glover as some sort of scientist character that's sort of just there to solve problems. Seems a little odd. You would think you could have a bigger role than that.
Dad, who is Childish Gambino? Okay, my thoughts exactly. We're 2 years away when this movie comes out from Childish Gambino blowing up on the Get Out soundtrack. Maybe even just slightly ahead of that.
Okay.
But Donald Glover's real claim to fame at this point was that he'd been on and off in the Community cast, which couldn't figure out whether or not it wanted to continue as a TV show for a while, and it just kept, I don't know. I didn't really follow that show past like the first season anyway. I kind of got bored with it. It got way too experimental for my taste. But that being said, if you flash back to 2015, it's really not that weird to think of Donald Glover being a bit part in a movie. He's in 2 scenes in Spider-Man Homecoming in like 2017. I mean, he was doing these roles before he had his musical career and before Atlanta like launched him as this megastar.
Maybe it's just that I watched all of Community. Maybe that's why I felt that way.
Well, and that's possible. But I don't think he like attained household status until he had done the musical thing. So Donald Glover is also known as Childish Gambino. That's his musical name.
Okay. I've never heard of that.
I figured.
Just showing my age.
Yes. But also because that was funny for me.
I'm glad.
Let's move to Did You Know? Did you know the atmospheric pressure on the Martian surface averages 600 PA or 0.087 psi, about 0.6% of Earth's mean sea level pressure of 100 kPa. Good Lord, there's a lot of math and symbols here. 14.69 psi. It is so low that a fierce storm, as they put it, would be something akin to a very light breeze messing up your hair. Author Andy Weir admitted that this was his biggest inaccuracy in the story due to the low air density. Sound would not travel like it does on Earth, and you would have to stand next to someone and scream for them to hear you, providing that you could survive the freezing cold temperature, poisonous atmosphere, and lack of pressure. All that says to me is that the central thing at the beginning of this film that even strands him was not likely to be an issue.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I was going to get into scientific accuracy at some point, and the massive sandstorms is one of the biggest inaccuracies left.
Yeah. I think the rest of it, because they worked with technical advisors from NASA on the film, as well as Andy Weir talked to a lot of them on the book itself. So they were working in a lot of the science, but yes, this is the biggest flaw in the entire movie is that you'd have that situation. All right, did you know? In the novel, Mark Watney has 2 master's degrees, one in botany and one in mechanical engineering. In the film, however, he has a PhD in botany and no engineering background is mentioned, although he is shown to have a knowledge of engineering and maintenance on the mission equipment. I don't know why you would make that change. It would explain so much of why he's able to tinker and do all of the things that he does, but okay. Did you know? Rich Purnell slips and falls after he finds a way to rescue Mark Watney and tells his boss, "I need more coffee." Donald Glover revealed in an interview that he slipped for real and just got up and continued to act, and the footage was retained in the final edits for the movie. I would assume the sound effect was added in later. Did you know? Sir Ridley Scott claimed that Matt Damon's solo scenes were shot for 5 weeks straight, after which Damon was relieved from the schedule. Consequently, Damon did not see most of his co-stars again until the cast was reunited to promote the film. I suppose that makes sense, but where in the production schedule did they film the scenes with him and with other people?
Early?
Yeah, I suppose that would be the only thing that would explain that. So they must have shot the scenes with the whole crew together, like very early on, and then done some makeup with him where he's like really slimmed down and skinny and has rashes and whatnot at the end of that part, and then done all of his solo work.
Well, you know what that was?
No.
Scurvy.
Oh.
He had no vitamin C.
Yeah, okay. Did you know? As Beck is about to take a dangerous trip outside the Hermes, Beth tells him to be careful because, in space, an unfinished quote of the famous tagline, "In space, no one can hear you scream." That was from director Ridley Scott's Alien from 1979. In the novel, Watney logs in the tagline in full after leaving Mars. And with that, we will take our first break, and we will be right back. Before we jump back into the episode, next week for our 282nd episode, we welcome back Peterson W. Hill to discuss Spartacus from 1960, celebrating its 65th anniversary. Directed by Stanley Kubrick, written by Dalton Trumbo, cinematography by Russell Meddy, music by Alex North, starring Kirk Douglas, Laurence Olivier, Gene Simmons, Charles Lawton, Peter Ustinov, and Tony Curtis. You won't want to miss that one, so watch ahead of the show by searching the Real Good app to find where it's streaming for you. That's REELGOOD. All right. Since Braden has nothing to plug for himself, that means we will fire back up everybody's favorite segment for this fall and discuss the Cinema Legacy poll. Tonight we are revealing numbers 88 through 81. You heard that correctly. Last week we left you off at number 91, and we'll just quickly recap what we revealed last week. That was at number 100, we had a 2-way tie between the Maltese Falcon and the Bridge on the River Kwai. In 97, we had a 3-way tie between All Quiet on the Western Front from 1930, West Side Story from 1961, and Fight Club from 1999. We also had a tie at 94 for All That Jazz, Night of the Living Dead, and Toy Story. At 93, we had Malcolm X from 1992. At 92, we had Nosferatu from 1922. And for number 91, we had The Conversation from 1974. Now, obviously, since we're jumping places in the list, that is because we had a 3-way tie here tonight that we will discuss at number 88. So, to kick this week off, at number 88, this 3-way tie between Moonlight from 2015, the Best Picture winner, Chinatown, a film we have discussed on the show recently, I believe about a year ago with Scott Cole, who was a contributor to this poll and legacy, so thank you, Scott,
Yes.
from 1974, and Wall-E from 2008, which we covered in our second season. So that's another episode you can go back and listen to. At number 87, we have our second Paul Thomas Anderson movie with Boogie Nights from 1997. And we say that, of course, this movie or this episode will be published shortly after his newest film, One Battle After Another, is released this Friday. At number 86, another film that we have covered early on in our show's history, Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind from 2004. So we have an episode on that as well that you can go back and listen to. At number 84, we skip number 85 because we have another tie here between a Best Picture winner and an almost Best Picture winner. We have Titanic from 1997, and we have The Social Network from 2010. Then at number 83, we had a film that I didn't even realize until I started putting my notes together, even made the list. This is a film that I have not seen and that I know only by name and reputation, but Who Framed Roger Rabbit from 1988. At number 82, we have one of the legal precedent movies with Akira Kurosawa's classic from 1950, Rashomon, which we also have an episode on. And finally, one of our most recent episodes that is appearing on the list from last fall, we had on a couple of great guests for that one as well. Peterson W. Hill, who will be back with us next week, as well as Kristen Battistella for Ben-Hur from 1959, yet another Best Picture winner on the list. So yet again this week, we had 3 different Best Picture winners. We have at least one, let's say, foreign film in Rashomon. It is Kurosawa's 3rd film on the list to date. We have several Best Picture nominees in Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind and The Social Network. And we have at least a semi-animated film and one fully animated film in Wall-E, the second Pixar movie on the list to date. So, we'll run through the list here quick. Dad, you have obviously seen Wall-E, as have I.
Yes.
Braden, have you seen Wall-E?
I have, yes.
Okay.
Not recently. I mostly remember it, but yes.
All right. Unfortunately, I think that film is becoming all too real with every passing day.
Yeah.
Then we had Chinatown. Dad and I have obviously seen it, doing an
Yes.
episode of the show on it. Braden, have you seen Chinatown?
I don't think I've seen Chinatown, no. I would need a
Okay.
refresher on even what it is about or who's in it.
Jack Nicholson leads.
No.
Okay. Then Moonlight from 2015. I know Dad has not seen this one. I have. Have you seen it, Braden?
I don't even know what you're talking about.
Okay, that's fine. Then Boogie Nights at 87. Dad, have you seen it?
Yes, I have.
I have as well. Braden, do you know of Boogie Nights?
I really don't think so, no. That is not... I might have maybe seen a scene from it, and that'd be it.
Okay.
Burt Reynolds is hilarious.
Well, it's probably Marky Mark's second best movie, personally. But Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, obviously Dad and I have covered it before. Is that a film you are familiar with, Braden?
This one's been recommended to me. I haven't gotten around to it.
Okay. I think it's the only film that Dad tolerated Jim Carrey in. In fact, I think I remember you nominating him for one of the 3 primary categories.
I know. I like Jim Carrey in that film.
Which is unusual for you because you've sworn off all Jim Carrey movies.
If you listen to an interview with Jim Carrey, I like Jim Carrey a lot. His comedy is so over the top that I just find it repulsive.
Okay. Then Titanic. I have seen it. I would assume you've seen it, Dad?
Yes, I saw it in theaters.
I did not. I was 7. So it was a little bit above me. But Braden, have you at least seen Titanic?
Have seen it. We had the dual VHS tapes, though I'm not sure if I ever actually watched that on those VHS tapes.
Okay. All right. And The Social Network. Dad, we obviously just covered this again. We revisited it very soon. We did the original episode back in season 1, but Braden, I have to assume that you've probably seen this movie?
Actually, no, I sort of avoided it. I was not that interested in the Facebook Foundation story.
Okay. It is kind of a little bit of a legal drama, so you might be interested, but okay, sure. I have not seen Who Framed Roger Rabbit. I have to almost assume Braden has not if I have not. So, Dad?
I've seen about half of it.
Okay. So this is kind of a glaring omission for the 3 of us. Rashomon, Dad and I have definitely seen it. I would guarantee that you've never heard of it, Braden.
This is another one I've never heard of. You're correct.
Yeah. Anything that's Japanese and Kurosawa is probably well beyond your Saturday cable watching.
You would be correct again.
Okay. And finally, Ben-Hur. Dad and I have covered it for the show.
Mhm.
Have you seen the original Ben-Hur with Charlton Heston?
No.
Okay. So, Dad, any other quick reactions to the list here?
No, it's just always amazes me how solid this list really is.
I think the one that really sticks out a lot to me, and it's just because it's not a film that in my head I've ever associated with like a greatness quotient, is Who Framed Roger Rabbit. Like, I've heard of it. There's a reputation behind it. I think it was nominated for Best Picture, if I remember correctly. But it's not one that, like, when people are discussing great films, seems to ever come up. And it's certainly not in the like top 3 Robert Zemeckis films that people like talk about.
No, and Bob Hoskins is great in the film, the bits I've seen. And it was really the level of how they integrated the cartoon and the real film was revolutionary at the time. So it made a huge impact. And if I remember correctly, it was like they got some of the voices to actually be done by Mel Blanc before he passed.
Okay.
I'd have to look that up. I might be completely wrong. It may have been they thought about it and he was not well enough or something, but I thought he did some of them.
Well, it's definitely a glaring omission for both of us that we probably will have to rectify. Outside of that, I'm glad that we've got our third Kurosawa film, given that it's now 3 out of 4 drops so far that has at least one Kurosawa film in it. I have to assume there are some other ones of his that are a little higher up this list, likely. But yet again, several Best Picture winners on the lists to date, and we have a lot of Best Picture nominees. So I think for as much consternation as we have about the Oscars and whether they get it right or wrong, and definitely it is an imperfect process, at least by the consensus of our participants this year, there seems to be some hurting among the Oscar nominated stuff.
Yeah, I'd say.
So any other quick reactions before we move on?
None for me.
All right.
None for me.
So next week we shall be revealing, I believe, number 80 through 71. But until then, stay tuned. We'll, of course, be putting a lot of information yet on our social media pages or accounts. You can follow us on YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, Letterboxd, or TikTok at the handle at Gmote Podcast. And I should also throw in Blue Sky there if you want to follow us. So all of those will have available content as the list continues to be released. I think we have a couple of weeks left where we're revealing 10 at a time. And then about the point I want to say where we hit 50, we get to 5 a week. So we can spend a little bit longer analyzing each film. But we left off at Best Performance. Dad, who did you have down?
Matt Damon.
Matt Damon.
It's going to be hard to say not Matt Damon. I don't know who else you would say, but I'm all ears.
It is 100% Matt Damon. Frankly, Ridley Scott is very lucky that he got Matt Damon to do this movie because Matt Damon carries a significant portion of the movie. And he does it while being stranded and alone. It's kind of like Tom Hanks in Castaway. Tom Hanks has to carry so much of that movie, keeping you entertained while he's basically talking to himself.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got to be very charismatic. You have to be invested in this guy's survival or his success in survival. And he's got to do it without really being able to react to anyone else. It's just his own circumstances and what he's going through. I really would have a hard time giving it to anybody else because the way this is written and the way it's framed, it focuses so much on his story. Yes, there is the Chiwetel Ejiofor and Jeff Daniels side of things, but even then, it's still secondary to anything that's happening on Mars at all times. All right, so we all had Matt Damon as our best performer. Who were some of our secondary performers here?
Go ahead, Braden.
For me, it's got probably Jeff Daniels. I just kind of liked his role in this film. He wasn't in it too much, nor were any of the other secondary characters, but he still played a pretty significant role in that, his actions and what he did in the film really sort of affected the rest of the plot.
This is about the point in time where he was coming off of, what was it? The Newsroom was the Sorkin show on HBO. And this is the point in his career where he kind of started playing these more straight-laced, stiff upper lip characters who were in charge of things. And while they were flawed individuals and they sometimes made poor decisions, like, you always believed they were going to try and do the right thing. And so I think he creates a very good backbone to that portion of the film, kind of in the teeter-totter where he's in control, but there are people obviously doing stuff around him and that are important to the equation. But ultimately, he guides the rest of the film, or the portion of the film that doesn't involve Matt Damon. So I have him as most charismatic because you're in a steady pair of hands. As good as the cast is, he still sticks out for me in this role.
I'll make it unanimous.
Well, I have him for charismatic, so it wouldn't be unanimous.
I'm sorry.
But
well, I had him for secondary.
I have him on my short list for most charismatic too. I hate to say the same actor twice, but it was hard to come up with another one for that as well.
Charismatic for me, I thought about having Mars, but I would rather look at Jessica Chastain. So I think she was more charismatic than Mars.
What about the music? I mean, Harry Gregson Williams had to convince the rest of the directors and the rest of the staff that it was okay to have just a bunch of random music on there that's not really traditional soundtrack music.
Yes and no. I mean, there are a lot of sci-fi films that use Starman by David Bowie, regardless of whether or not you're doing the disco soundtrack that is part of the background of this movie. But there are a lot of other films, and the year prior to this, like the soundtrack for Guardians of the Galaxy had hit big with a lot of 70s and 80s hits that was kind of in the same vein, more or less. It's using pop songs or older pop songs. So, I mean, this isn't new territory, but it is a decent soundtrack nonetheless.
And the disco is really what I'm thinking of here, actually, is to fit in 4 or 5 disco hits into all this. He was pulling something off there.
Disco hits, isn't that like an oxymoron?
It really
depends
is.
on whom you're asking. If you're asking the Bee Gees, I'm sure not.
So if you go to one of those shows like dueling pianos, where you request songs of the artist, that the person who knows all these songs, you'll catch on that they don't know any disco songs. Because I have requested a couple of disco songs, including songs for the soundtrack, and they've never been able to play them.
Well, I mean, I would find it probably very difficult to play most of those on piano, but yeah, okay. So I'm going to backtrack here for a second because we skipped over my best secondary performance, and I'll just say I had Ridley Scott. As lucky as I think he is as a director that he had a really great cast to work with, there are some very good directing choices here. Again, it has to be, as much as Matt Damon is carrying in his solo scenes, there is kind of a setup in the way he's framed and the plotting devices and the rest of it that you can't really screw up. Otherwise, the rest of the movie kind of falls flat. Here, I find him that he has this, well, I'm trying to think of how to, it's not grim. Like, there's a lighter tone to the movie that a man stranded on a planet alone. Like, Castaway is not a fun movie for me to rewatch because I find it so depressing. Watching Tom Hanks try to survive for a couple of years on an island by himself. This movie to me is entertaining and rewatchable because there's this kind of lighter tone to it that as Matt Damon continues to figure things out, you're just drawn into, okay, how is he going to solve this next problem? Okay, how is he going to solve this next problem? And it works in concert, whether it's the soundtrack or the lighting or the production design or the script. All of those things seem to work well. And ultimately that falls under the director's category, that he brought all of these elements together and made them work into something that's entertaining and rewatchable. So let's move to best scene then. I have 5 nominees here. I have Waking Up Stranded, which is when he first wakes up and has the pin thing basically in him or stabbing him in the chest. Then I have Discovering Mark, which is when they actually realize that he's still alive there on Mars. I have Growing Potatoes, which is his attempt to try and farm Mars, essentially. And that goes through kind of more of a sequence than just a solo scene, because it takes a little bit longer over the course of multiple scenes to get there. But I'm going to treat that as one. I have Communications, which is when he gets the previous Mars, I don't know, is that a satellite? Pathfinder is the technical name, but it was a rover or something. But anyway, when they start trying to communicate and then they go to the basically typed messages is the end of it, but they have the cameras and the rest of it. That's just a fun sequence for me. And finally, I have The Rescue, where he actually leaves the planet. So I know this movie is 2.5 hours long, and there are plenty of scenes to discuss or nominate here. What did I miss?
I have nothing.
I also have nothing because
Oh, wow.
one of the scenes
Okay.
I'm going to add is for favorite scene.
Well, you got to add it now then. You can't go off the board completely.
When Mark Watney sort of adapts the rover to work for long distance travel, by digging up the reactor and that sort of scene, which I might be conflating with a scene you've already listed, and that might be some part of Growing Potatoes somewhere. But to me, that was going to be
probably its own thing.
That's kind of my favorite scene, including just saying you're not supposed to dig up the hazardous materials while he's doing it.
Okay, so let's add in Decaying Isotope to our list of nominees here then. And so that gives us 6. We have Waking Up Stranded, Discovering Mark, Growing Potatoes, Decaying Isotope, Communications, and Rescue. What is the best scene?
I have Growing Potatoes.
I do too.
That's a solid choice. I do think Discovering Mark was kind of a fun moment too, and that's definitely up there for me.
Okay. I think I personally have Growing Potatoes because it's kind of the first real stages of him figuring something out. And so now you're following this guy, and he's figured out his first major problem. And yes, it's got some comedic parts to it where he's like smelling everybody else's shit. So, he makes some wisecracks of that. But him direct to camera as kind of like this documentary type thing where he's just recording how he's going through this process is very entertaining in something that should be normally kind of like a throwaway. And that's when you, to me, really start to invest in this movie, as we've got this guy stranded on Mars. He's trying to keep himself alive. They're trying to figure out how to get to him. How is he going to get through all of this? And so that's the jumping off point for me. Even though Waking Up Stranded is there, it's just like a very quick scene and he like patches himself up and then that's it. But the Growing Potatoes for me is where you really kind of like invest in the film, and it's like, all right, I'm going to sit here for the next couple of hours. So Braden's already nominated his favorite scene. Dad, what was yours?
I have Communications. Just the sheer difficulty of trying to figure it out and develop a system of communications that was going to work so that they could talk, and how elaborate things had to be in order to get it started. It just took a lot of patience and a lot of ingenuity. So I thought it was a fun scene.
For me, it's The Rescue, and it's only because there is an emotional catharsis in building up to that point. I'll admit that I cried at the end of this when he actually gets rescued, because you've really invested in that character. So it's got to pay off at that moment. Even if you've seen the film before, there's still that buildup of this guy has been stranded. He's got all of these problems. He's figured out his way. They're doing these extraordinary things to try and get him back. But it's the payoff of that moment that, for me, is why it's a favorite. Most indelible moment, though, it's got to be waking up stranded on Mars.
I had the rescue.
It's not flying like Iron Man in space.
No, because as much as I'm relieved by the rescue and as much as I remember it, there's a part of me that, like, the moment you wake up and you're stranded alone on a planet, that just like that reality that sets in, to me, that's why it's the most indelible, because it's like, oh my God, I'm here alone. Should I just give up and die, or how do I go about this? To me, the negative emotion of that trumps whatever the triumph of the rescue is.
I mean, I will admit, of the scenes I can do away with, flying like Iron Man through space is very high on my list. But it's almost unnecessary for that to even be there. But also, he makes the line, he's flying like Iron Man.
All right, so that looks like a good spot for our second break. We will be right back. Before we jump back into the episode, and before we get to the Stanley rubric in a minute, if you're ever curious about our master greatest movies of all time list that has every graded movie we've ever discussed on the show, there's a link in the episode description of every episode of this show, or you can go to RonnieDuncanStudios.com and find it as the top entry on the greatest movie of all time podcast show page. That has the grades we've done so far for all 253 movies we've graded, and we continue to add more each week. Make sure to check that out as we go and follow along. Dad, do we have anyone to remember this week?
Yes. Sonny Curtis, 88, American Hall of Fame musician. The Crickets and songwriter I Fought the Law and Love Is All Around. And Claudia Cardinale, 87, Italian actress, The Pink Panther, 8.5.
Now, I'm not as familiar with Sonny Curtis as far as a musician. I think I know Love Is All Around as a song, but maybe not. But we've covered Claudia Cardinale as at least one time on the show, and I would assume at some point during our, depending on how long the show goes, that we'll cover 8.5 as well. But we did cover her for the Pink Panther originally, and she was a very welcoming presence in that film.
Yes. Sonny Curtis's notoriety was Buddy Holly and the Crickets. And at least the other cricket at the time of Buddy Holly's death was country music legend Waylon Jennings.
Interesting. Okay.
Who survived by flipping a coin with the Big Bopper as to who was going to get on the plane with Buddy.
All right. Well, we recognize these here fondly for their contributions to the arts with a moment of silence in their honor. Thank you. All right, let's go to best funniest lines. I have to admit that most of my nominees here, all except basically one, are Matt Damon, Mark Watney lines. So the first one I have here, Mark Watney. I don't want to come off as arrogant here, but I am the greatest botanist on this planet.
Mark Watney. In the face of overwhelming odds, I'm left with only one option. I'm going to have to science the shit out of this.
Braden.
Give me a second. I don't know. I didn't have any.
Okay, I guess we'll leave you out on this one. All right, Mark Watney. So I'm going to be taking over a craft in international waters without permission, which by definition makes me a pirate. Mark Watney, space pirate. Dad?
Mark Watney. After finding out the intercept distance is too far. Did you say 312? Yeah, I'll just wave to you guys as I go by.
Mark Watney. They say once you grow crops somewhere, you have officially colonized it. So technically, I colonized Mars.
The rest of it's in your face, Neil Armstrong.
Mark Watney. At some point, everything's going to go south on you. Everything's going to go south, and you're going to say, this is it. This is how I end. Now, you can either accept that, or you can get to work. That's all it is. You just begin. You do the math, you solve one problem, and you solve the next one, and then the next. And if you solve enough problems, you get to come home.
Mark Watney. I'm the first person to be alone on an entire planet.
Mark Watney. Good news. I may have a solution to my heating problem. Bad news. It involves me digging up the radioisotope thermoelectric generator.
Mark Watney. Luckily, in the history of humanity, nothing bad has ever happened from lighting hydrogen on fire.
Mark Watney. Tell Commander Lewis disco sucks.
Mark Watney. Mars will come to fear my botany powers.
Anything else?
I have stuff.
I'm out.
Okay. Vincent Kapoor. How's he doing? Mindy Park. He asked us to call him Captain Blondebeard. And my last one, Mark Watney. I'm definitely going to die up here if I have to listen to any more of Commander Lewis's god-awful disco music. My God, Commander, could you have not brought something from this century? No, I won't turn the beat around. I refuse to. All right, so that moves us to the Stanley Rubric. Legacy is up first. This is a measure of the legacy of the film approximately 5 years after it came out, so 2020 to today. What is the legacy of this film as split between two groups, the industry and the general audience? 5 and 5 points for a total of 10. Dad, would you like to go first or second here?
I'll go first. There was a whole rash of science films and Interstellar and Gravity. All these came out in a series. I don't think it really had much impact on the industry overall.
And that's the next category, so you have to go to legacy.
I am at legacy. So it did not have much impact outside because they had a whole clump of these. And then afterwards, nothing for a while. And I just don't think it had any staying power. So for the industry, I'm at a 3. The public, I'm going to give it a little higher because there is a real group of people that love this film and watch it religiously on a regular basis. But for a lot of us, it just never really had much impact. And our informal poll in the office, which is very informal, only about 7 out of 30 people saw the film or had even seen it.
Which is actually pretty good for our group.
Yeah. So I'm at a 3.5. So I'm at a 6.5 overall.
I'm only a half point different from you. I have a 3 as well on the industry, but only because of how many people use this movie as like part of their overall resume to maybe go on and do other stuff or simply just had bigger careers after this. I mean, yes, Chiwetel Ejiofor had been nominated 2 years prior as Best Actor for 12 Years a Slave, and Donald Glover had been in Community and so on and so forth. But Benedict Wong had not been in a Marvel movie quite yet, and he ends up being now like part of the Marvel universe. The same with Sebastian Stan. Kate Mara had kind of made a name for herself, and frankly, I guess she's kind of seemingly moved on from acting currently. Like, I haven't seen her in a whole lot for a while, but okay. Jessica Chastain was clearly a star or an established star by this point. She'd been in Interstellar the year before, then she's in this. She does have an Oscar now to her name. But it's just the combination of all of those people combined being in the same film that I think helps prop this up, at least on an industry level, because I would agree that otherwise this film is kind of generally forgotten among the industry. It's not really brought up that much. It's not achieved critical success. I think its most notoriety is that it's Matt Damon's last Oscar nomination, and it's Ridley Scott's only decent film over the last 15 years. So outside of that, I don't think there's a whole lot to argue there. But I'm a 4 on the public side of it just because it kind of still lives, oddly enough, and maybe it's just anecdotal for me, but in a lot of people that are not like huge movie people, but that seem to like this movie and have caught it many, many times. So from that standpoint, I'm going to go with a 7.
I'll just say I'm a 4 for both. I'll explain my industry score first, which is this is one of the first, or this was sort of early on in the whole stream of movies that's Dana's point out, because, you know, for example, Gravity came out after this. And so
No, it didn't.
I thought it did.
No, Gravity was 2 years prior and was nominated and almost won Best Picture. Interstellar was the year prior. This was actually on the back end of most of those.
Okay. Well, the one thing that this has that's different is, you know, how wild the action sequences are. So it's a little more science space, a little less incredible action, science fiction than maybe some of those two. And when we get into impact and significance, I'll just mention I think there's a couple other films that got a lot more like this and a little less like those two movies. For my audience, I'm also just a 4. I just think as much as I've seen it on TV as just something you can select from the TV guide, that people have got to be watching it because otherwise these networks wouldn't just keep airing it. And that's most of the reason I'm at a 4.
Okay, so that brings us to a 7.17 average between the three of us. Impact and significance. This is a measure of the impact and significance of the film in the immediate 5 years after it came out. 5 and 5 points apiece as shared or split between the industry for a total of 10. So kind of the inverted version of legacy. Here I have a 4 among the industry because it made a lot of money. It was big for Ridley Scott's career. So I think because of this movie, he got to make a lot more big budget stuff later on, like Gucci, like The Last Duel, like Napoleon, that he could take more chances on because he had this multi-$100 million movie that he could point to and say, look, I have this under my belt, so you can trust me. That apparently was not a wise choice, but still, it happened. And then the rest of the cast goes on to bigger and better things. I mean, most of them have further developed their careers or done additional stuff beyond that, save for maybe like Jeff Daniels hasn't been in a ton of stuff since this point, other than I think it was like Dumb and Dumber 2. And Matt Damon hasn't had like the Oscar roles since this point, but he's still around. And I think he's made some very good movies in there, most notably Air, which I think was actually a very good movie and frankly could have been nominated had they made a better campaign of it. But overall, I think that a 4 is warranted on the industry side of things. And from an audience perspective, this was the top grossing non-IP movie in a sea of IP movies. Like, I don't want to completely bring in the 2015 worldwide box office here, but it's pretty filled to the brim with just, I mean, you got Star Wars at number 1, Jurassic World, Furious 7, Avengers Age of Ultron, Minions, Spectre, the James Bond movie. Inside Out is the only other one that you could say is original IP. And then Mission Impossible, Rogue Nation, The Hunger Games. Then you have 50 Shades of Grey, Cinderella, the live action. The next highest grossing, like adult non-IP movie is The Revenant. That's how far it goes. So in a sea of all this movie that is a feel-good, that is kind of a crowd pleaser, made a lot of money and did very financially well. I think this was somewhat of a critical and audience success, and I think it's been spurned on by the fact that it still lives in the consciousness of the public. So from that standpoint, I have a 4.5 there. I have an 8.5.
Industry, I have a 3.5. But I will now, on your point that it kind of launched several careers over the next 5 years, much more, I'll go up to your 4, or I'll go up to a 4 on that.
I don't know if I would claim it as a launching pad, but more of a resume booster.
Okay. Either way, I honor your point, and I will come up a half a point on the industry based on what your arguments were.
If you needed something else just to satiate that point, 7 Oscars, and one of them isn't for Best Director. So in amongst when we're having this field now of 10 nominees, it gets nominated for Best Picture. Matt Damon gets nominated, I think, the only time he's been nominated for Best Actor. So there's other reasons to also say that the industry supported it, but it was also a critically supported film that year, too.
Yes, I'll add that to my oeuvre. Anyway, for the public, I'm going to stick with this. I have a 5, simply because it became the darling of everybody who was so franchised out. I had no interest in Jurassic anything at that point in time. I had no interest in anything Marvel at that point in time.
Okay,
And
when did you have an interest in either of those things, before or after?
well, I at least watched the first couple of Iron Man films.
I was just waiting for another reference to a type of movie that Dana does not like at all. And for example, Fast and Furious.
Yeah, well, okay. The first couple were at least entertaining. But anyway, so I'm going to go with a 5 on that. I'm going to go with a 9.
All right, so I will also just say that I'm about an 8 to 8.5. So let's say 8.5. For the industry, I'll just mention there are what I would say sort of science movies that come out after this that were sort of allowed to be a lot more sciencey and a lot less, high action, including Arrival, The First Man, the movie about Neil Armstrong, Ad
Okay.
Astra with Brad Pitt, and even movies like The Midnight Sky or Stowaway. These are all movies that were sort of allowed to have a lot less high action than earlier space travel films like Gravity did.
Okay.
I will say for audience, for me, it's really just that NASA used this as a sort of way to help them get more funding for their own Mars mission that they call Journey to Mars. And so they worked directly with NASA to get some of the science and the accuracy correct, but also sort of to launch NASA's own program and funding.
Okay. So that is an 8.67 average between the three of us. Let's move to novelty then. This is a measure of the originality of anything having to do with the movie, although technically it's usually about the subject matter involved with the film, and a measure of the execution on the film. 5 and 5 points apiece between those two for a total of 10. I'll go first here. On originality, there is next to nothing that I feel is that original about this movie. You could say the Stranded narrative, but then you could point to Castaway. And there are other Stranded movies that you could probably point to, or things where guys are operating out kind of on their own. This is not original in terms of the genre, because we'd had high concept, let's say high science space movies preceding this. We mentioned Gravity and we mentioned Interstellar that were preceding this. And frankly, there's not much here that I find to be original. I mean, and that because it's somewhat familiar is part of probably the reason that it is crowd pleasing and somewhat popular. But by that standpoint, I'm going to give that a 1. I know.
Wow.
But
Wow.
as far as the execution, it's not a perfect film. I don't think it's particularly well edited. There are parts of what I think are the book, even though I've never read the book, that are clearly left out, like the other relationships between him and the other crew members. Like they kind of shoehorn in at the end that relationship between Hansen and the doctor, Sebastian Stan's character, and Kate Mara. And you get about 30 seconds of that relationship and then are supposed to care about it in the cutscene at the end. There's also some scenes of Matt Damon's character that they took out that I thought could have been good as well. But then again, 2.5 hours is already pretty long, even by modern standards, where I think last year's Best Picture winners averaged like 2 hours and 22 minutes for the totality between all of them. So 2 hours and 30 minutes is a lot of an attention span. And there are some pieces out of this that I just felt either you needed to develop more or you needed to cut completely and make it a tighter film. Even as good as it is, and I know that some people like to cable watch, like Braden, it's not a perfect film, but it still excels very well in being entertaining and rewatchable. So because of that, I'm going to give it a 4 there. I have a 5. Sometimes you got to hold things honest. You have to establish what the baselines of things are.
I am surprised you said 4 after that entire explanation. For originality, I'm also pretty low. You mentioned Castaway twice, which is something I've had on my notes as well, or Robinson Crusoe.
Sure.
So the only difference is now we're doing it on Mars as opposed to on the planet Earth. That being said, I will also think, as far as, how good the science and how hard they're trying to be good about the science does help with the novelty a little bit, because that's what takes it apart from other films based on Mars, which have like lost civilizations that people are discovering, or aliens that are threatening the people that are on the planet. I'm at a 3. For execution, I'm at a 4. I just think they managed to make a very well done, high grossing film that could be aired over and over again, that kept people entertained, and that, I agree with you. There is maybe one or two spots that they could have added or cut. I've mentioned already the scene where he flies through space like he's Iron Man. I really thought that could have been cut down. So I'm a 4 for that.
For 7.
Okay, for novelty, the originality, it's not very original. Now, the setting and how it was packaged, there is a certain level of originality by its methodology or how it was put together. So I'm not quite to your level of a 1. I'm at a 2.5. Execution, there were parts of the film that drug. Things could have been better explained. There was parts that could have been eliminated and other things fleshed out some more. It's a good film. It's not a great film. So I'm at a 4. So I'm at a 6.5 overall.
So that is a 6.17 average between the three of us. Apparently, we cannot stay away from the decimals tonight.
Yep, guess not. That's why you have a calculator.
Let's move to classicness then. This is basically a measure of how well the movie is aged or not, how much it may have been ahead of its time, although 10 years on is really hard to judge this category. However, for the nuance of it all, we usually turn to our nuance connoisseur. Dad, would you like to start?
Yes, I would. Starting at a 6. This film, I was amazed at how they did not try to envision how much change would be happening in culture in 20 years. So it was right on point. The fact that the supply ship blows up after it leaves the launching pad was so reminiscent of SpaceX that I found that to be right on point. And I have to give that at least a half point up for that alone. Yes, Elon. Yes. And there wasn't anything really horrible about it. I mean, again, you would expect that women would be in charge of missions and more leadership roles in films, and they did that. So I don't know if I need to give any points up, but I will give it a half point up. So between the fact that they did a nice job of kind of not overdoing the future, the fact that there's nothing cringy or problematic that I saw in the film, another half point. Tongue in cheek, half a point for Elon and SpaceX. But this is the fact that it overall did it. I'm at a 7, so I'm going to go with that.
Okay. There are a couple of things that I think I question the accuracy of. Like in 2015, the world was a lot more collaborative. It seemed like we were in a good place, and we were prior to all this like authoritarian creep that's happened around the world as certain dictators have gotten stronger. In what world Are the Chinese voluntarily willing to help Americans with their own secret technology when they don't have to? That feels like science fiction because it's just not happening. Between that and the fact that NASA is pretty neutered at this point, space has become kind of like privately entertained, or it's going to authoritarian governments. So to that extent, it kind of feels like the Olympics. Like it's either going to be awarded to self-funding billionaire classes or to countries that really want to promote tourism in their dictatorial country or authoritarian country.
Come to Kazakhstan.
Yeah, something like that. Outside of that, I just have to also think the global collaboration is just not going to be there. And here's the other kicker. In the 10 years since this movie came out, our collective attention span to the news, primarily due to the tangerine Idi Amin that is currently occupying the White House, the attention span for a day-to-day news cycle is so small that we don't remember jack shit. How many people are going to be paying attention for 530 some days to a guy stranded on Mars?
He's still up there? Oh, I guess I missed that.
It's going to be like Balloon Boy. You know, that was like big for a week, and then everybody's like, oh, okay, well, that's done. Or the Chinese weather balloon. Does everybody remember that one? Like, God, the attention spans are so small that I just cannot imagine people literally going to Times Square to all see whether or not he gets rescued. It's just not going to happen. People will move on very, very quickly. So from that, I have 3 points off just for that stuff alone. Now,
okay,
the timelessness is not a factor here. This movie is not old enough to really factor into that where I would normally give some points back. But what I will say is that the scientific accuracy, for the most part, and making other people interested in the sciences, I'll give back a couple of points. But ultimately, I'm going to end at a 5 here.
Okay, well, I will say I mostly agreed with what Dana said, which puts me right around a 7 as well. Including, as far as women astronauts go, and having 2, including the commander of the Ares, I really did think helped the classicness score a little bit, because I'm not sure of how many even science fiction modern day movies would try to put 2 women to command in a space shuttle as a part of a crew on a mission. So that's a lot of my reasoning as to why I thought it was at a 7. And I guess I just didn't consider some of the things Tom mentioned as detractors. So
Okay, well, that's a 6.33 average between the 3 of us. Rewatchability. This is insert your own test on how rewatchable the film is here. I will let you boys go first, and I will take up the objective standard of this category in the rear.
We'll let the fanboy go.
I'm a 10. The reason I'm on this, it's such a groundbreaking surprise. I mean, the reason I'm here today is because I've watched this movie just too many times. This is the movie I've seen the most. I have not seen any other movie more than this movie. So I'm a 10.
I'm shocked by the surprise of that surprise.
It would be hard to justify a 9. I mean,
I have seen it.
Okay.
And if I never see it again, okay. If it's on, I might watch it again. I might watch it if somebody else wants to watch it. So, but am I going to go, oh, I really should watch The Martian again? No. So I guess I'm at a 4.5.
Okay. So that brings us to me. Now, as far as I'm concerned on this one, Braden is somewhat correct here that it being on cable and being in the public consciousness and being somewhat on replay for people to just pick up on a random Saturday afternoon does help the objective score on this one. I think it also being a brighter movie with a happy ending that is somewhat of a crowd pleaser with some charismatic people in it and an overall great or all-star cast, if you will, helps aid to the overall rewatchability of this film. I don't know if it's the most rewatchable thing, but I think there's enough people that really repeat viewing watch this movie regularly. And I don't just mean like they occasionally will rewatch it, but they have it on like a cycle of once or twice a year type of thing. So with that, I'm going to go with a 7 here, and that will bring us to a 7.17 average between the three of us. Now, for audience score on this one, we had an 89% for Google users and a 91% for Rotten Tomato users, giving us a 9.0. So to repeat the categories here, we had a 7.17 for Legacy, an 8.67 for Impact and Significance, a 6.17 for Novelty, a 6.33 for Classicness, a 7.17 for Rewatchability, and a 9 for Audience Score, bringing us to a grand total of 44.51, and currently placing it on our list at number 163 between Knives Out and The Dirty Dozen. So a little just below the kind of median of the list. If you think that we've done 253 movies to this point, so roughly the median point would be about 126, 163 isn't too bad. It's just a little bit below the average.
Okay.
I'd say a little low, and I'm glad I was here to sort of up the average a little bit and get it just a little higher up the list.
Well, given another film that we've mentioned a couple of times tonight, Gravity is only a few spots lower. It is currently at 169, so 6 spots lower.
Yeah, not so bad.
As always, if you have any commentary for us, if you like how we did our scoring, didn't like how we did our scoring, or just have some general comments for us, you could reach out to us at greatestalltimemoviepodcast@gmail.com. You can find us on any of our socials on YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, Letterboxd, Blue Sky, or TikTok at the handle at GModePodcast, or you can write the show at RonnieDuncanStudios.com/GModePodcast. Okay, let's head to remaining questions on this one. I already gave one of mine, which was, in what world are the Chinese voluntarily willing to help Americans? But my second one was, how is the attention of the world transfixed for a year and a half?
I don't think it is. I think it's done in spurts.
What spurts?
Well, when he's finally coming back, or when they're trying to collect him, then it becomes popular again. Up until then, nobody pays attention.
Like, I think that the notion of, because this movie is kind of like Apollo 13 in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
That was a couple of weeks that they were up there. That you could maybe understand, especially in the 60s where there wasn't the like constant churn of news. So people getting their evening news was really all that was to kind of keep this event going. And so that could survive for multiple news cycles. But anymore, I'm sure something stupid like the Hawk Tuah girl would probably take over, and all of a sudden Mark Watney's on the back page.
Maybe. I think it would come and go.
So any remaining questions for either of you?
I know Kristen Wiig has been doing more,
Serious
dramatic roles. But at any time, did anybody else feel like she would bust out into her Kathy Lee Gifford impression?
No, but I thought she was miscast.
I did think her appearance and her character in this was a little bizarre and out of place, yeah.
Like, of all the actresses that you could get to do that role, she is not one that I find to be like a foundational piece for what that calls for. That's your PR director, and just the target lady in the back of your head is just not what you want for that character.
Yeah. I kept, little doll hands coming up.
The sisters from the Finger Lakes.
Leaks, yeah.
Any other remaining questions?
For the rescue scene, I wonder how they got down this path, that this is the rescue scene that they ended up with, where the astronauts are flying out of the out of the spaceship with rope attached to them, trying to catch Mark. There's so many other ways you can do that, including the shuttle just has enough gas and they're trying to track him down. I don't know how they got here. And I do think some of that's just strange and probably blew a lot of budget they didn't need to.
Well, I don't know what it says in the book. I have to assume it's very similar to how he's rescued in the book, but it sets up a lot of dramatic tension, and that's the whole point. Like, there are different intervals in the entire equation where everything's got to go right. So you're basically taking, I want to say the rescue sequence lasts for like 20 to 25 minutes, and you've
Yes.
got to hold attention through all of that, whether it's the bomb that helps slow the ship down, or it's the the spacewalk with multiple people going on there. There's just a lot going on in that scene besides himself. And then to top it off with the whole hole in my glove Iron Man thing, it just creates the right amount of dramatic tension for the crowd to be overwhelmed at the end and cheer, which was the whole point.
Well, leaving Mars from the launch and then meeting with the people in the ship is enough that to me you can cut out some of that middle there somewhere and make the in-between journey a little easier because there's enough tension at beginning and start, and so that's kind of why that's one of my remaining questions. I just don't know who wrote that, who came up with that and went, oh, this is what we're going to go with.
All right. So I want to thank our guest for being back with us for his third time. I don't think you are currently on the schedule again at the moment, but we do have our schedule for next season as well. All that being said, is there anything you would like to promote for yourself before we let you go?
I don't have anything to promote. Just thank you both for having me on. It's been nice to be on again to cover one of my personal favorite films. So thank you for the invitation.
You're very welcome. Dad, any remaining thoughts for the week?
I've been following along in my subscription to the Hollywood Reporter of the films being released and their coverage of TIFF and what looks like it's coming out for the fall. I'm getting kind of excited, looking forward to a lot of great films coming up over the next 2 or 3 months.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm quite ready for award season. We just got off of a few significant film watching projects, particularly our upcoming episode of the Revisionist Almanac that should be, I think, only a couple of days out from when this episode debuts or is published. But that being said, I know that a lot of these things are coming. And with that in mind, the odds-on current favorite, it seems like, that is getting a lot of attention is a movie that will be premiering 2 days from when we're recording this. And that'd be the new Paul Thomas Anderson movie, One Battle After Another. Now, at one time, and up until probably very recently, Leonardo DiCaprio was pretty much unassailable on his film choices. I don't think he's been as on the ball the last few years, at least from my taste, on what he's picked out on films. But I'm ready to be pleasantly surprised with this film. I also have been very critical of at least not understanding most of Paul Thomas Anderson's movies. The one movie I'll leave the exception to is Magnolia that I actually connected to. And I know we haven't really covered that many. I think Magnolia to this point is the only one we've covered on this show. I'm leaving myself open, and I'm going to try to attempt to go to it on Friday for the premiere, at least in town here in Madison, and see whether this is something that actually is worth the buzz. The one trailer that I did see a couple of months ago very much reminded me of kind of like a Coen brother-esque Fargo, Big Lebowski kind of style movie, that it would be somewhat comedic. It would be somewhat of a family drama. It's got some crime elements to it. So I don't know anything about it. I'm going to try and go in as cold as possible and see what happens, but I'm very hopeful for that film. Now, in addition to our 1982 episode of the Revisionist Almanac that we have coming up, I also want to mention that I will be on a newer podcast with one of our frequent guests. That would be Clarissa Beckstead, who has now started her own podcast. I've seen that one, and I will be discussing a film that we've discussed multiple times here on the show, and was also my personal number one film, what I thought was the best film of all time, 12 Angry Men. So look for that also coming up, as I am looking forward to being on that show and talking with her specifically about a great, great film. But that looks like it's all for us this week. Thank you for listening. I'm Spartacus. Next week for our 282nd episode, we welcome back Peterson W. Hill to discuss Spartacus from 1960, celebrating its 65th anniversary. Directed by Stanley Kubrick, written by Dalton Trumbo, cinematography by Russell Meddy, music by Alex North, starring Kirk Douglas, Laurence Olivier, Gene Simmons, Charles Lawton, Peter Ustinov, and Tony Curtis. You won't want to miss that one, so watch ahead of the show by searching the Real Good app to find where it's streaming for you. That's REELGOOD. Please like, follow, rate, and review, or whatever on whichever platform you have so that more can join in on our fun. You can also email the show at RonnieDuncanStudios.com or at GreatestAllTimeMoviePodcast@gmail.com, or find us on YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, Letterboxd, Blue Sky, or TikTok at the handle @GMoviePodcast. The Greatest Movie of All Time is a production of Ronnie Duncan Studios. Our show is mixed, edited, and written by Thomas Duncan. Our music is thanks to Purple Planet Music. Our distributor is Captivate FM. Our technical provider is Riverside FM.